All right, we are live and I'll start the webinar now at 6.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay. Let me. Are we expecting any more folks, Jeremy?
We of course send it to all board members.
Okay.
I know of a couple of executive committee members who informed me they won't be here tonight.
Yep.
I think our max is a 6 of executive committee. I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I see 4 of the 6 here.
So Cynthia Gonzalez texted me. She's unable to attend tonight.
I'll be earlier as well.
Pat also is unavailable.
Same.
Okay. So
there's one position vacant, so that leaves the universe of 6. And the only 2 who are missing right now, Karen Rolnick, who is the treasurer, and Sam Sierra, who's the assistant surgeon at arms.
Sure. Okay.
If you'd like me to call roll, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, let's start. I wanna be respectful of people's time. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to mute everybody. I am just calling members of the executive committee. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please unmute yourself. Acknowledge your name and then mute yourself again. If you don't hear me acknowledge you, I didn't hear you. So we will start with Cesar Zuniga.
Present.
Thank you. Julio Pena.
Here.
Thank you. Pat Ruiz. Karen Rolnick. Cindy Vandenbosch.
Present.
Thank you. Cynthia Gonzalez. Victor Swinton.
Present.
Thank you. Sam Sierra. That's the executive committee. Everybody else, I will write your name down.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Good evening. I guess I want to start by just acknowledging a couple of things. We're still in a pandemic and things are still pretty rough for some folks, maybe less so for others, but certainly there's still a lot of just uncertainty and a lot of pain. And so I just want to acknowledge that. I want to make sure that we just kind of set some ground rules about like this conversation we're going to have tonight and moving forward. And I think for me, it's just, it's important that we like listen to each other and that we really try to just show a little bit of grace and appreciation for one another, because it's been rough and I get it. So I want to just add a couple of things to the agenda that hopefully we'll have some time to talk about. The one thing that I want to add is a conversation about the building that we occupy. And, I'll give you some details in a minute. And also want to talk about the homelessness issues, and just how we're hoping to manage the conversation around homelessness through the housing committee. And again, I'm happy to share some of the thinking that I've done on that, and some of the counsel that I've taken from other members, particularly Karen, who did a really good job of sustaining that committee. But I think she made a good point for why it's running its course. But again, I'm happy to entertain a conversation about.
Yeah, I would appreciate to have more of a conversation on that, and I would propose reinstating that separate committee. But I hope we can have a conversation more on that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I hope to have tonight. So those are the two things that I want to add to the agenda. And I guess the first thing on the agenda that I thought needs a lot of just thought from all of us is this idea of resuming in person or some kind of a hybrid situation. So I want to say a couple of things on that. I totally understand that people have a lot of strong feelings. I myself live with someone who's immunocompromised, and that's, since this pandemic has started, it's been just something that weighs very heavily in my house. So I come from that perspective. I also feel like, maybe a year ago, we're almost 2 years into this. I was certainly operating under the assumption that we were going to have like a resumption to normality. And like in my head, there was going to be like this day when we were like in the pandemic, doing the things that we do in the pandemic. And then one day, magically, we were going to be back to normal. Yeah, that kind of shows you where my head was. Wishful thinking, that's not going to happen. It seems like this is the new reality, the new normal. And so I want to just have a conversation about what's possible, but certainly regardless of what modality we stay in, virtual, hybrid, in person, I just feel like there needs to be a conversation about where that's going to head and how we're going to maybe at some point have a transition. But I think that really ties into a secondary thing for me, which is just figuring out how we're going to do our work better, how we're going to show up for this community more effectively. I know COVID really threw off a lot of plans we had for staff professional development and a whole host of other things that we wanted to do in the community, data that we wanted to collect. I think that I want to get back to that, and we need to have first a conversation about how we do that in whatever modality. So that's the first thing, but I'll stop there and open it up. Where are people at in terms of in person, in terms of hybrid? Just any thoughts? I'm happy to listen and hear you out. Cindy.
Yeah, I guess I have a question about what is happening with other community boards, whether we have a sense of kind of what other community boards are exploring, and also whether it's allowed. Like, can we continue? Is it even an option to continue doing Zoom meetings or doing this format? I know that there was an executive order that allowed for this. And I'm just wondering from that standpoint as a baseline, like whether it's still possible to be virtual. And then also I am interested in engaging in discussion about, we've got the technology, like unlike a lot of other community boards, we actually installed the technology before the pandemic in order to host in-person meetings that could also be live streamed. And so, maybe we can look into sort of how we could facilitate a meeting in a hybrid format, but I do think that might be a challenge. Then again, we've opened up opportunities for local residents to engage in meetings virtually and have had good participation from local residents in a lot of our committee meetings where attendance in some cases pre-pandemic, especially for some of the committees, was sometimes a challenge. So I just laid out a bunch of things, but I guess where I'd like to start is, what are other community boards, like, where is this moving, not just within our context, but also for other boards, and what's the sort of legal situation at the moment, or what regulations we need to be following as we think about hosting public meetings in this, in terms of format.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have the answer to that specific question about what are other community boards doing. Jeremy, I don't know. Do you have a sense in speaking to some of your counterparts? What
We're all in the same boat in that we all operate under the same executive law, which allows us, for the moment, during the pandemic crisis, to work outside of the open meetings law, which allows us to meet via Zoom and to vote via Zoom.
Got it.
If we are outside of that, then we are required to meet in person. You could only vote in person because that would be within the confines of that law. There's been talk about changing the law. I don't know where that is. But for the moment, we're all operating in this same sense. We all have this either WebEx or Zoom as a platform. The vast majority of Brooklyn boards are just virtual. I believe Board 10 has a hybrid version. I don't know if all their meetings are hybrid, though.
Sure. Okay.
Maybe, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, maybe it would be a good idea to talk to CB10 about how that's working, what we can learn from them. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
So if I could just speak about one thing with a hybrid versus in-person versus Zoom. Obviously, we could do a Zoom meeting. Obviously, we could do an in-person meeting. It's the hybrid meeting. I'm just concerned we don't have the technology for at the moment.
All right. Let's hold off on the. I hear that, but I want to hear other board members just again generally where you're at and how you're thinking about all of these possible modalities. So let's go with Joan. Joan?
Hi, everybody. Well, there is nothing like in person, but this pandemic is still raging. And my fear is that our boardroom is large, but when we are a body of almost 50, and then we have guests and participants, how do we successfully separate from each other? That would be virtually impossible. Although this particular variant is, I guess, coming not to an end, but decreasing. Are we going to have another variance?
Yeah.
And what do we breathe? And the mask, you can't breathe. That's a given for all of us. And if we're subjected to someone that is positive and we don't know it, do we bring it to our children? That scares me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, we're adults, we could cope, but a child?
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Joan. I hear you. I mean, I totally hear you, and the very things that give me pause. So thank you for that, Julio.
I think you know, a lot of what Joan said, you know, I absolutely hear and like fear myself, particularly given the family members that are, immunocompromised and whatnot. I also, like many other folks on the board and our family, I work with children in after school. And I know, being back in person has literally changed a lot of their lives, right? Because they have been working remotely in school for over a year. And it was like really detrimental to them. And I think for some and for this community, having some kind of option to being back to in person or some hybrid may give some people an option to engage where virtual may not be for them, right? I think we can perhaps incorporate both. I don't think like tomorrow is going to be that option, and I don't think next week is going to be that option. But I do think in the future, it will be some kind of option where some people will be comfortable joining remotely and some people will be more comfortable joining in person. I think the in-person will be the challenge, right? Like we'll need to figure out like capacity, masks, vaccine or like there are a lot of things that we'll need to figure out that we don't have the answers to right now. But I think we will need to figure out some kind of hybrid that I think will make sense for a neighborhood that, not everyone has internet access, not everyone has a computer, and some people do. And so I think some kind of option that allows engagement for most people probably is the best solution.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Julio. And one of the things that I've been working on through the pandemic is on a coalition of folks in the community. We've been advocating for broadband internet access for this community as a utility, basically. And one of the reasons why I'm doing it is because I firmly believe that the pandemic really laid bare the sort of the digital inequity that exists in communities like ours, and everything is moving in the direction of remote platform. And as Julio mentioned, there are folks who are struggling with both accessing the technology, but also having some competency to use the technology to their advantage, to engage in schools and healthcare, in this context, local government. So that's a really, again, just like my motivation to want to protect my family really is informing how I think about this. The same kind of intensity around also recognizing that some people, for a lot of folks in our community, this is not an option for them to engage and participate. So that's another big motivation of mine for us to figure out. And I think you're right, Julio. I think we're probably just gonna have to figure it out. Like things that we don't know in this moment, we're gonna have to just keep kind of processing together and figure them out. And I agree, it's probably not gonna be tomorrow, but I think we need to start laying the groundwork for a process. So I really appreciate that. Barbara.
You're
You're
muted,
muted,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Hi, how you doing? Hi, everybody. A couple of things. I've been attending the 72nd Precinct council meetings, and they've been having them at, I think it's called Waleed, some catering hall in the 40s. Yeah, we've been having it there. And the place is huge. So it was you were able to have space and not be there. So not be on top of each other. So I'm wondering, just on a temporary basis, could we do that? Like go to a place like that so we'll be spaced out. The other thing is that I attend AA meetings. Some of the meetings have been in person. And what we've done is that we don't allow anybody who comes into our meetings unless they show proof of vaccination. And we write down people's we write down people's names and numbers so we know who attended the meeting. So just in case something does happen and somebody does get sick, we inform other people. And we've also done hybrid meetings as well, where some people, are watching on Zoom and the rest of us are in person. So there are a lot of options. I would love to see some people in person again. I understand everybody's fear about getting sick and everything, but eventually it's gonna happen. So however gently we can do it to break into this, we'll figure it out.
Thank you, Barbara. I feel you about seeing people in person. I miss your hugs. So I would love to have one of those. So yeah, I totally get it. I get it. Zach?
Hi. Basically echoing the sentiments of what everybody said, but there is an importance in having our meetings in person. And there are nuances that are missed, and there are issues that we discussed that I think we've not discussed fully. People have not been able to input fully because of this platform. And I think that moving forward, we will have a hybrid model. It's the technology might not be at the board right now, but it's quite easy, and lots of organizations are doing it without much trouble. So I think allow everyone to feel comfortable, and to all of Julio's points and everybody else's points, that's where this is going. And it might not be tomorrow, but it certainly will be the next day. So
thank you, Zach. I agree. Ravika?
Hey, can we actually, before we keep having this conversation, can we be really clear about process and like the goal of this conversation? I think it'd be really good to understand, like, what does the long process look like? Not just this conversation, but is this going to be, like, how is a decision going to be made? Is this an executive board decision? Is this a full board decision? Do we vote on it? Do we talk to people outside of the board? Do we, like community members, do we prioritize the feelings and viewpoints of people who feel that they're particularly vulnerable or will feel left out if we have in-person meeting? I guess I'm just like really confused about where we're going with this, other than how we each feel about it.
Well, the point of, for me, the point of this is to get to where you want to go. So I just don't think we're there yet. But I think I'm certainly wanting to have a process that incorporates how people feel, right? And how people, not just how people feel, but what they're willing to do. And I think also there are some questions still kind of like that we have to dig into in terms of, we have some technology, but it sounds like, this hybrid idea requires additional technology. So for me, tonight's conversation was not meant to articulate a specific plan, because I don't have one. I just kind of wanted to open it up and I think build a plan together. And I guess the specific question about who decides this? I mean, Jeremy, that's a great question. I don't know, is this a decision that the executive board takes? Does the board need to vote on it? Can we make that a thing that we?
In one sense, who makes this decision? It will be up to the state with regard to the open meetings law, because we will have a requirement that people are in person to vote unless that law is changed somehow. So when the COVID emergency is lifted, we will revert to that earlier version of the law.
Can I ask
Good
a
point.
question, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure.
What's the time frame at the moment for this?
Your guess is as good as mine. It's what the law says is when the governor lifts the COVID emergency.
I
have
understand
no
that.
particular insight into.
I'm actually asking just to clarify, aren't the current policy that we have, when is the deadline? Like when does it, when,
So the law specifically says when the governor lifts the restrict
Okay.
the emergency declaration. There's no, previous versions of it had a date set. So I believe the last date was January 15th. This newest version doesn't have a specific date listed.
okay, so like next week, since we now, have no mask requirements in lots of spaces, like next week we could be told that.
It could
they've
be,
lifted it.
yeah.
So potentially we could be out of compliance with the law. I will also point out there is no agency that enforces that.
So there it again, I think that's a really good point. Like we could choose, or I could choose as the chair to just be out of compliance and say, yeah, we're based on these conversations, my folks don't feel ready to like sit next to each other and sue me or arrest me or whatever,
Right, and if say we have a land use vote and some developer doesn't like the way we vote and wants to say we were not in compliance, I really don't see why they would waste their time and money on a lawsuit when our vote does not carry weight other than our opinion.
Karen, hi.
Hi. Yeah, I think that we really cannot make this decision right at this moment because of all the reasons we just heard. There are legalities involved and we have to be within the law regardless of what our personal feelings are. But I think the best we can do is create definite scenarios and just have a pros and a cons list to doing it. I mean, I personally think that the more ways we can engage our community, the better. So that would mean the hybrid model would probably be the best for the community, but we have to stay within the law. And so that's one thing. And I also wanted to mention, I'm looking at an article in the city dealing with this very subject. I don't know, I cannot paste into a chat box, but maybe I can email someone the link. And it's COVID concerned community boards ready to break state law to keep online meetings. So it's about this very subject.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy.
I'm used to hosting. So I just wanted to say that it seems to me at some point, sometime in the future, I mean, we were already talking about the potential for some type of hybrid model before COVID. There will be some version of hybrid, whether it's for, just committee meetings or something of the like. I think it's worthwhile for us to inventory the technology that we have and figure out in the interim what would be necessary to have a hybrid meeting. And then if we don't have the budget for it, get on our elected officials about putting money in the budget for community boards.
Got it. Okay, I want to try to move on, but Cindy and Julio, you have one more thing to say on this?
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to mention, kind of going back, I agree with Jeremy, and I think that this is about preparedness, right? So we've started the conversation tonight, but I'd like to see us do some research, speak to CB10 that's doing hybrid. Thankfully we have a lot of the technology, but it's also about methodology. So maybe there's folks that work with technology and are doing hybrid virtual meetings. So I'm happy to be involved in that process if there are others that want to do some fact finding and research before a subsequent meeting. But I think doing this research and understanding where we're at and just being prepared with what the approaches could be, and like Jeremy said, what pieces of technology do we not have that we need? But I think some of it is also about skill building and understanding how to produce this properly so that people can engage and we can have a true democratic process for people both in the room and online, if that's possible. That's all.
Thank you, Cindy. You summed it up perfectly. So yes, thank you. Julio.
And I'll just add, that was something in terms of like the technology in the boardroom, that was something that I was planning on like inventorying with Jeremy like 2 months ago, and then like schedules didn't line up, and then the COVID pandemic hit. But that's something that I would like to do hopefully in the near future.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on. In terms of next steps then. So I have 3 things that I'm gonna do. Assess, and I think, Cindy, to your point, just do a little bit of due diligence and research. We're gonna look at we're gonna sort of inventory the technology needs to make it, to start with the preparing for the possibility of hybrid. As far as like the moving forward, until we hear otherwise from the governor's office, we're still remote. There's nothing changing about that. It's really just a conversation starter around some of the action steps to I think, as Cindy said, summed it up, to just be prepared. So thank you. This was really useful to me. Let's go to the next topic. The waterfront. I think for me, one of the biggest lessons from some of the work that we've done over the last couple of years on zoning has been the notion that we're always reacting to a developer or to some project. And I feel strongly that we try to take a more proactive kind of approach. And it's something that I've talked to the council member about. And I think her vision is right on point as well. She's thinking more sort of district-wide kind of conversation about rezoning, and I think that's really in line with what I've been thinking about. So a couple of things though that I want to be clear about. We still have very broken tools and processes, right? So we need to acknowledge that. But I do think that it's certainly within our purview to make a decision that we want to continue to use one of these broken tools, a new 197A plan, or we can say, no, we're going to do our own thing and utilize other tools that are available that may not sort of conform to sort of the dominant way of doing zoning in this city, but I think that's okay. Again, no, I'm not making any decisions today. I just kind of wanted to put on the table, what are some of people's thoughts and ideas about how do we engage our community around the idea of comprehensive planning? So anyone? Oh, there we go. Antoinette, go ahead.
Hi, can you just clarify what you mean by rezoning the waterfront?
I'm not exactly sure that necessarily is something that needs to, in other words, I'm not sure that, I think rezoning is part of a conversation about development or having a vision of development, but I'm not specifically focused on anything that is about rezoning. Again, that's maybe one of the things that happens as a result of a more comprehensive plan, but I'm really focused on the idea of a comprehensive plan.
Okay, I guess I'm just, can you just give some more context then, just to orient us why this conversation is happening now, and what the long-term vision is for it?
Yeah, it's happening now because we had a really contentious rezoning, about a year ago, and that created a lot of conversations in the community about, instead of, again, reacting to rezonings, that we engage community to have a more comprehensive vision for what we want our waterfront, our community to look like. And, I think there have also been other projects along the waterfront that some are as of right, the last mile stuff that has come up. So I think there's so much happening in our community that it seems like the right time to like have a much broader conversation. And in terms of where we're going with this, it's again, we're bound by laws and we're bound by statute. Obviously, we have to sort of conform to that. But I think, opening a conversation up to our community is a healthy thing to do.
Okay, and has there been any conversation with Uprose?
So let me be clear, there has been no conversations with anyone other than this conversation that we're having right now. So Uprose, whoever, whatever stakeholder wants to be a part of this conversation, let's do it. I mean, so yeah, so no, I haven't, and we should.
Okay, and then, sorry, just one last question. So you're opening up a conversation to re-envision the waterfront away from what it is currently, industry, as zoned as industrial? I'm just a little confused. Sorry.
I never said that. I'm not gonna, that's not what I think you're saying that. If that's what you want to talk about, I'm happy to do that.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to understand the conversation, but thank you.
Yeah, it's so let me be as clear. Let me try to be more clear. It's an open-ended, open conversation. I believe in that. No agenda. Hopefully an agenda will be developed by a very representative cross-section of our community. That's what I want to do. So yeah, I have no clear vision for this other than creating an opportunity to have even a conversation about a comprehensive way of looking at planning and development in our community. That's it. Nothing else. Katie?
Hi. Some of the things that I've been thinking about are the pivot that a lot of kind of the pivot in conversations that we've been having in this community board about being proactive and defining a vision. And I'll just give like a tactile version, like a good case study or good example is the subcommittee on last mile facilities. There is nothing in the community board 7 that says that we should be tackling this issue of last mile facilities because it's an as of right project. You have, the land use has very specific things that they look at, and that's it. And that was why, in other conversations at Community Board 6, they were like, how do we tackle this? We can't tackle it. We don't have the right to do it. I think we now see you've got proposals coming up. I hope we'll get updates soon in, the next couple of months from folks, but you've got the state assembly member who's trying to put some legislation through to tackle last mile facilities in our district. You have a city council member who's also looking at some zoning changes to try and tackle last mile facilities. And that is bubbling up, then there's this amazing last mile coalition that Uprose formed with other organizations, right? Community-based environmental justice groups. And, what role did we play in that? We offered a convening space. We offered to pose some questions about, not kind of being like it's just like a patchwork of problems and challenges that we're facing our district. And we activated ourselves. And I want to use that example because that's what this open-ended question that I feel like is being posed is kind of an envisioning of also what is the space of the community board, right? You can narrowly define it and look at the rules and just say we only do these things, right? There's a whole lot of community boards and that's how they function. But I think there's a lot of power in this community in our district, and I think we're kind of on the edge of understanding it. And that's kind of how I respond to that question. And think it's like something, kind of a pivot point, kind of an interesting thing to think about, and like what else could be possible. So I just wanted to provide that perspective.
Yeah, I think, Katie, thank you. You just articulated much better what I'm trying to communicate, which is there's nothing wrong with having a conversation about it. We're not talking, we're not making decisions. We're I think for me, it's like exploring, and I really appreciate and where does the community board fit into all of this, right? And I tend to think that, given the sort of the stuff that we do on the board, it's a very logical place to convene a conversation of our community about what we envision for our community. Thank you. Karen.
Hi, I just have two things I want to mention, and I just want to bring up as a thing that we might want to consider. When I first joined this community board, when I first started going to meetings over 10 years ago, I thought our 157 plan, what is it called, that we have was terrific. I thought it was wonderful. It put down a footprint for what the people envisioned for their community. But I really think we ought to maybe take another look at that, because the world has changed. And it's changed since the internet, it's changed since COVID, it's changed. So many things about our world have changed. And I think the one thing that plan lacks is it does mention affordable housing, but I think we need to make affordable housing front and center and have specific things written into that plan on how we're going to accomplish this, what with no land available. So I think that maybe that is worth looking into, just tweaking it a little bit to accommodate more for affordable housing. And I also just want to say that I think the community board meetings and the community boards are the best representation we have of the community, and no outside organization represents this community. I just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I we do we have a unique vantage point that I think, again, for me, it makes sense to sort of entertain this conversation. I don't know, and maybe John, if you're available, or someone else, I don't know that that's an option in terms of revisiting an existing 197A. So maybe someone else can speak to that.
There is no mechanism for that, and it would require the various city agencies and the city council to be willing to amend it as well, since they all passed it.
Right.
And I don't think any board has ever gone back a second time to the well, right?
And in fact, no board since us has passed a 197A, I think because, as you said, it locks you in, and the world changes.
Yeah.
Well, look, honestly, I go back to what you said earlier in terms of first principles. We're a community board. We can do anything we want, right? And if we feel collectively that we need to plan, air quotes, a portion of the district, we should absolutely feel free to do that. And then in that planning, we'll figure out what tools we have, whether it's zoning or planning or parks or a policy that is last mile against last mile trucking or whatever. We can incorporate all of that, and it's up to us to decide. But it's a process, and I think the part of it is Cesar is just really trying to decide. You always start off with a goal, right? What's the goal? Is it to ensure good paying jobs in that district, or is it having affordable housing throughout CB7? What's the goal that we're trying to achieve? And then you follow that with how do we do that? What's the objective? Is it through zoning? Is it through a land use plan? Is it through preferences that we institute through our capital planning? Every year we say these are the things that we want to spend money on. All that feeds into it. And then we figure out what's the actual strategies and tactics that we implement in order to bring this about. But we have to start off with that overall thing. And I guess, Cesar, the only thing I would just opposed, not saying I'm against it anyway, but the waterfront is a specific district, right? And to date, most of the 197A plan has been really about access and jobs.
Yeah.
Far be it for me to say, but from my point of view, the most important thing in our district that we're struggling with right now is how do we keep people here, given our working middle class background, and how do we make sure that there's housing for people so families can continue to live here.
Sure.
And obviously there is no housing down in the waterfront area, and that's a zoning decision was made long ago.
Yeah.
But I think from my point of view, if we can somehow figure out how to deal with the housing issue, I think that it is more, I think, future looking from my point of view.
I want to be very clear that that all of these things are part of the processing that we have to do to kind of arrive at a goal. I think, John, you're absolutely right. And, I think personally, again, as an individual, my jumping off point is, the idea that the waterfront, should remain an industrial waterfront. And like that, I think for all of the reasons you outlined that have to do with housing and job creation, I think that's our best bet, is to really make sure that we preserve that character, right? And so but I agree, it could be that the conversation takes us to prioritize housing, and that changes the kind of the where the planning is going to happen, right? Because there is no housing, and hopefully there'll never be housing on the waterfront. And so, yes, I totally agree. And again, I'm merely just trying to get the ball rolling. I know one of the things, John, if you remember, we wanted to do this more comprehensive look at the district, and we had our partners all set up, and then IC just kind of sucked the oxygen out of our just capacity. So I kind of just want us to, get back to this idea of a more comprehensive, just let's call it planning, let's call it, visioning, whatever makes sense to people. So point taken. Cindy?
So just a couple of things to follow on what John had just shared. I mean, I think we have to be clear in our approach. Are we discussing the waterfront, or are we discussing the district? Because while affordable housing
Hey, I'm sorry, Cindy.
For sure, in our district and all of the city. It makes, oh, you're not able to hear me?
You cut out for quite a bit of your statement, yeah.
Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're better now, though. Okay.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that we need to be clear about what we're addressing. If we're going to be looking district-wide, which in a way, maybe that's where we start to set up our goals. And if we're going to focus on sort of the waterfront, personally, as someone who does work down on the waterfront and is well acquainted with the industrial sector, I would like to see, if we're going to be looking specifically at the waterfront, I would like us to get out of the Zoom rooms and get down to meet some people and experience the very places that we're discussing plans for the future. Let's talk to people that are there now and get a deep sense of what was there before, who is working there now. Let's talk to them. Let's talk about those jobs. I think a lot of times when we're in meetings, we sort of speak in the abstract about these, but we want to engage more people in that sector. But in order to do that, we actually need to do the outreach and get out into the community and actually see on the ground what's happening and talk to businesses about the challenges they're facing, or why it is that we really do need an industrial waterfront if that's what we're going to advocate for. So I'd like us to root this process, find a way to get out of, I think the brainstorming sessions are valuable, people coming in for presentations, But I also think it's really important we physically go down to Bush Terminal Park. We go down to Industry City. We go down to the Brooklyn Army Terminal, and we talk to people, and we get a real sense of what's happening. I just think we have to do more of that on the ground work if we are going to engage in a community-driven process.
Agreed. Thank you, Cindy. And this has all been very helpful, all these questions. Paul, you have a comment? We can't hear you.
Yes.
Oh, you're muted? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. I guess you guys are talking about the possibility of looking at the rezoning, and I wonder, I'm pretty sure many of you remember that maybe 10, 15 years ago there was a rezoning for Sunset Park up to 7th Avenue, and at the time we were talking about just move forward with 7th Avenue up to 1st Avenue, and then we will come back and look at 8th Avenue. So I wonder whether that would be something that that we might be open to look at 8th Avenue to see whether we could finish that portion of the rezoning.
Sure.
Or even I think a lot of people are complaining about the zone that is for 7th Avenue now, whether we could take a look at 7th and 8th Avenue to see whether there's any changes that could be made that can benefit the community.
Yeah. So just Paul, I want to just respond because I really want to correct the record. We're not talking yet about any rezoning.
Yes, I know.
And frankly, what you're raising is just, for me, is an example of like, this is what I would like to do, is have a conversation, for example, with stakeholders along 8th Avenue and 7th Avenue to talk about what their vision and their idea around like comprehensive planning. So again, zoning certainly is one of the tools, but I would hate, I think John articulated this well, I would hate to have that be the starting point of a conversation, and instead of us leading to that as a possible tool. So, but yes, I think for me, Paul, I've heard a lot of other stakeholders talk about a different concept for that part of the district. So again, I think all of these various conversations need to be had so that we can start to figure out how to prioritize and what to focus on, as Cindy was mentioning. So yeah, let's talk. Let's create let's create a context where we can have these conversations.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. Unless anyone else have any other comments or questions, otherwise, I think I'm going to follow up with John as the land use chair, and Jeremy and staff to like think about some possible next steps to just first, I think, continue to bring stakeholders into the conversation, UPROs, whoever. I mean, I think we need to figure out a process of broadening the feedback loops, and I'm happy to do that. Okay, and then I guess finally
I'm sorry, can you just clarify if
yeah,
because I know as an agenda item, it was to have a conversation on the waterfront. And I think the statement that Cindy had made was really helpful. So could you just clarify if this conversation that we're going to be following up on is a comprehensive plan for the district, or are we only looking at the waterfront?
Yeah, the district makes sense. Absolutely. Okay. Let's in terms of I just quickly wanted to just check in mainly with really this is more for Jeremy, like just where are we in the process of getting to know all of the new representatives of the new administration? What's that process look like? Because again, I think invariably we're going to have to integrate some of these conversations with folks in the new administration, and I'm just wondering. Yeah.
So getting in good shape with that now. We had our district service cabinet meeting today, so I had a number of agencies there. I asked them all for their new agency flow charts and contact information. We have met at meetings our reps for our new elected officials. In fact, I believe we have FISA from Councilmember Hanif's office here tonight. Anastasia Yaskova is here as well. Anastasia is from BP's office. So they are here as well. We're getting to know them mostly through Zoom, but I think tomorrow I am starting to meet some in person as well. So I think we're good to go pretty much with our new reps and our, not every agency has every position filled at this point. I met the borough president for the first time today because the borough service cabinet was also today. He's still in the process of hiring. So in fact, they just hired for the first time since I think Howard Golden was borough president, an actual person who deals specifically with community boards. That's Carol Ann Church, who was the assistant district manager for Community Board 2 in Brooklyn. Yeah. So there is some movement around agencies, but I think we're pretty close to knowing everybody we're going to need to know for the various agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only reason, there's a couple of things that I think, you know, as we were undergoing this transition in administrations, for us, like we had this, you know, these conversations about DOT and what's happening on 20th Street and 39th Street. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, you know, what.
So some things are still in place.
Okay.
Some things we're still waiting for. Brooklyn DOT is still the same.
Okay.
But there's no, right now, there's no, for example, president of EDC.
Okay.
There's no commissioner. I believe there's a temporary commissioner for Department of Buildings.
Okay. Okay. All right. That sounds fine. So let's see. We have about 3 minutes left. So I guess quickly, there was we'll maybe we need to table the last two items because they kind of require a little bit of more conversation than we can give them tonight. So I think we're definitely going to do that. I'm going to circle back with Jeremy and reschedule, just set up another one of these meetings. But then I'm going to individually follow up with some of the chairs to kind of go over a couple of things that, again, that were pending from December when we were having this transition. So now that we're here, yeah, go ahead, Antoinette.
So before we end the conversation, I just really quickly wanted to bring up that the Department of Homeless Services is going to be opening up a shelter on 51st Street and 2nd Avenue. Mm-hmm. And from my understanding, there was a conversation between Karen and yourself. Karen was the former chair of the Ad Hoc Homelessness Committee. And it looks like there was a conversation to dissolve that committee and then to combine the Housing and Ad Hoc Homelessness Committee into one. Mm-hmm. I was a former member of the Ad Hoc Homelessness Committee, and it wasn't really made public that that committee was going to be dissolved. So I think that one, it would be really great to have an open conversation with the community board about that committee and any of the challenges that it was facing, and also to have a conversation about possibly reinstating that committee. Given the time frame, the Department of Homelessness, DHS, they want to have a public meeting. And given that they're opening up the shelter next month, I'm happy, you know, to work and have a public meeting scheduled this month, given that we don't have enough time to continue this conversation here. But I just quickly want to mention that I think personally, I think it's a lot to combine two committees into one, especially given the amount of work that the Ad Hoc Homelessness Committee had in building relationships with shelters and community members, and being there to create surveys and do a lot of outreach and hear community concerns. And then also to tackle a lot of the issues from members of the Housing Committee in terms of there are folks that want to go out and do a land survey. They want to research community land trusts. Also wanting to look into accessibility in housing in Sunset Park. So it just feels like it's a lot to put under one committee. And I would appreciate, again, to have a conversation about reinstating the Ad Hoc Homelessness Committee, and maybe seeing if there are any new members of CB7 that would be interested in taking that on. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So yes, let's have a conversation. So just to be clear, yes, there was a decision made by me to dissolve that committee after consultation with Karen. Happy to explain that decision-making process, but that decision has been made. Now, I'm hearing that there's a desire to have another conversation. Happy to have it, but yeah, I think there's nothing to hide. I'm happy to at the next meeting to explain the decision-making. I'll defer to Karen as well, because I think she had some really helpful insights in helping me make that decision. So that decision, yes, absolutely has been made. And I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to talk more about it. So I'm going to leave it there. And I'll follow up with Jeremy. I'll follow up with you about some scheduling stuff.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.